All right. Next up, Chris, we'll hit you with Tatum Bethune. What was the ranking there? It was a ranking James least amount of yards before contact, correct? The PFF was rating Tatum Bethune.
Yeah, before they got down, basically tackles with the least amount of yardage. Tatum Bethune was number one, I think, with an average of was it 3.3? I gotta try to find this. David held
stopping guys in their tracks,
basically,
not letting people drag them down the field. So Tatum Bethune, sure tackler. Chris, we'll start with you in regards to what he means to the Florida State defense this year.
You know, the best possible thing for Florida State when it comes to Bethune is that's his grade at the 3.3 yards given up, which is very it's impressive. It's actually really impressive to me because he wasn't healthy for most of last year. So if Florida State gets a healthy Tatum, then man, I'm going to say this: the only thing that I want Tatum to work on, so to speak, and hope that he did during the offseason is his coverage ability a little bit. And that's really hard for me to say because I think he did a decent job. But if I were to nitpick one thing, I want him to cover better in space. But all I want from him is that just loud, obnoxious. I need him to be a little bit more like Verse. I want him to be that vocal piece for that room. And I think he can be. I think he was a little bit last year. But, yeah, his injuries last year really had taken a toll. But that young man would not give up. I mean, for the longest, we didn't know he was hurt. I never knew that he was injured. And he played through a lot of injuries last year that, surprising to me, and even Randy Shanahan made the statement that he was a tough SOB because most kids can't play through the particular injury that he had at the time. And he didn't even tell him until the game was over that he had been going through it since practice. So I'm really impressed with what he brings to the table. And, again, another one that is very disciplined and can definitely critique his game. And I think he will. And he means a hell of a lot to what the defense does at Florida State.
Yeah, I found the tweets. Some of these actually make sense. I would have never just let people. I'm not one of them. I'm a nerd in actually watching film. I'm not a stat nerd because I gotta tell people. I just remember when they gave us our scouting reports in the NFL and in college, and I'm not even gonna pretend to know. They break down film way better in high school than they did when I was in high school. But returning linebackers with 400 plus snaps and a 90% tackle rate. I'm not even going to pretend to really break down what that is, but I know Tatum Bethune is in the top 5. He's in there. So, but that sounds like something that's real good. But the tackles, this is really good. Tackles at or behind the line of scrimmage. Tatum Bethune is right up there. At 18, DeLoach, Bethune was at 3.3 yards or fewer before tackle. And Kalen DeLoach was the second best in the ACC at 3.4. So they're both right there. Great combo there. Like Chris was saying, especially in coverage, that's probably Tatum's weakness. But when you really take a step back and think about it, we needed Tatum to be more of the striker. The guy who's better in coverage is Kalen DeLoach, and that's the guy that we want in coverage or spying athletic quarterbacks. If you go back and I was talking to a scout at the combine about Nephew, because I'm close to DeLoach, so you'll never hear me say anything bad about Nephew. But the guy was saying they could just draft him off of the Louisville game alone, and just how he spies guys, and then even when he's with the ability to lay a big hit, he is definitely not a chump for contact. In his frame, he's long, he's athletic, he's fast. only a couple times that I think, but I believe those were when people were breaking it down with coverage situations, where there was miscommunication between the linebacker and the safety who had the running back out of the backfield. If you go back, watch Wake Forest, I think late in the second half, they scored on us on a wheel route. Basically, nobody had that guy covered. It's a very bad way to play defense. The joke, you might want to cover that guy. But I think where it got weird, and even if you go back and you watch the Oklahoma game, if you go back and you watch the Florida game as well, but a lot of this could also be discussed about not having Fabian Lovett. And there's some stats that are going around about Florida State when Fabian Lovett was in the game and when Fabian Lovett wasn't in the game. And he was hurt as well. The ability of the guys to get onto the linebackers, when you had to take Bethune out, they're just – Lundy wasn't there yet. But he got better as the season went on. But Lundy's got to take that next step. Omar Graham Jr.'s got to take that next step. And then the guy who I want to see what this kid Nicholson is going to be able to provide them. If they're able to get that, I think Florida State fans don't need to cry about linebacker recruiting as much, as long as you're able to get your one blue chip linebacker and you're able to get your project guy. You're going to be more than fine.
All right, Chris, Kalen DeLoach.
Okay, so Kalen might be – I got to be careful with what I say. Kalen might be my favorite defensive player for Florida State. Reason being is because he's just nonstop heart, man. The kid has got – it's like tell him he can't do something. Tell him that he's not good enough at something. Tell him that he's not a top-ranked or one of the best linebackers in college football. And it's like he's going to do anything and everything to prove you wrong, and yet at the same time look effortless. I think that he might be one of the most talented linebackers that people are overlooking. I think he's being overlooked a lot by not just our fans, but as football fans across the country. I think they overlook him because they're used to linebackers doing X, Y, and Z, and that's just not what we're doing now. It is a different scheme. It's a different type of play, and I probably get more excited when DeLoach is on the field than anyone, just because at any given moment it could be a huge play. I mean, he started really figuring out how to get interceptions. He was also figuring out how to strip sack, and he started pulling it off really nice about the 7th, 8th game of the season. He really figured out what his role was in this defense, and he's done it even more so in this offseason. There's one thing that I would say he needs to work on. The only thing that I could say he could work on is continue to not listen to anyone out here talking about you. If they're saying you're something different than what you actually are, which he already does a really good job at that. But we all know they all read what's going on in social media, and he does not need to pay attention to anyone other than himself, his trainers, and his coaches, because I think he might be the most improved defensive player that Florida State has this year, and he was already really, really good. But I think that he's going to take control of the defense this year, especially at the linebacker position. And I think he's going to show out because he wants to be in the league.